Hi everybody, my name is Bookie and I'm here with the Good Eve channel. And today I'm going to be talking about 7 books you need to read this year to help you build financial strength. And why? We always say reading, read 30 minutes a day, read 1 hour a day, knowledge is power, learn. But it matters what you're reading. Some of us reading is like food, right? Food for your brain. So if you're just eating burgers and fries and junk food, yes, you're feeding your body something or you're feeding your brain something. But are those things helping you achieve your goals? You want to fill your brain and feed your brain with the right kind of fuel. So I have 7 books that I'd like you to read this year. And that means maybe 1 book every 2 months. So it's not very terribly taxing. And some of the books are pretty short. And all of these books are available as audiobooks as well. So if you're someone who enjoys just getting a lot of traffic, it's a really good way to take advantage of being in traffic. You have to be in traffic to get to work or to get back home. Then you can just subscribe for some audiobooks and listen to them while you're commuting back and forth. You'll discover you'll finish a book in 2 weeks. You'll finish your book in a week, depending on your traffic situation. So it's a really good way to just expose yourself to really good philosophies and thoughts and be in the company of people who think like you and who have an approach to investing and finance that you have. Now, of course, I'm going to ask you before I get into the list that you give us a like, click that thumbs up button. And I also want to ask you to subscribe and share this with 7 people. 7 books, 7 people. I think it's a fair exchange. So please help us out. We really appreciate it here at the Good Eve channel. So the first book I'm going to share with you today, and some of these are classics, so don't get bored too early, is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And what I'm going to share are just a couple of things I learned from the book. So I think Rich Dad, Poor Dad fundamentally will help you if you're thinking about what are assets and what are liabilities. I remember when I first read the book many years ago, I disagreed aggressively with him that the house in which you live is not an asset. I said, how can that be? But you know what? As time has gone on now, I understand what he means by that. If you think, for a lot of Americans, even Nigerians, the largest purchase we own, the most valuable asset we own is the house in which we live, but it generates no income for us. So if you're living in a house and only you live in that house, then you're spending money maintaining the house. That's what liabilities look like. You're spending money paying land use. You're spending money up and front to pay for services that you consume in the house, but the house is not generating any income for you. So you have this big block of capital that you've basically put under your mattress that can't earn and can't work for you. And that's a big investment no. So I think if you're starting out, there's a stage you get to in your life where definitely you should own your house. And look, it doesn't mean you shouldn't own your house. That's not what I think he's saying, and that's not what I took away from it now. My point is that if you say, I'm just going to rely on the appreciation of my home to drive my net worth, you run a very big risk, because what happens if you need access to that money? That means you have to sell your home or take on a mortgage or a loan on your home to have access to that money. So ideas you can think about with that are, if you do own a home, own a multi-unit home. So you own a home that's a duplex, or you own a home that's a series of 4 townhouses, or you own a home that's a block of flats. So you live in one apartment, maybe the penthouse, so you have all the room you want, and then you have apartments below. So now it becomes an asset because it's earning for you while also providing you shelter. So I really just remember that in terms of making the paradigm shift also about being an employee and being an entrepreneur. And I think it's not just, even though he didn't talk about that in his books all those years ago, but it also, to me, I applied the knowledge to saying, even if I'm an employee, how do I think more like an entrepreneur? So having side hustles and multiple streams of income. A fabulous book. It's always worth a read and a reread if you haven't read it for some years. Second book I'm going to talk about is The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. Now, Dave Ramsey is a financial expert that I discovered I would say about 3 years ago. And he has a very brash, in your face, abuse the heck out of you style. If you are foolish, he will tell you are foolish. He even brings scriptures to tell you you're a fool. And so I think sometimes if you need a good wake up slap to the face, shock to the system, his book is really helpful for that. And what's good about it is he also shares his own story about how he made money really young in real estate. It was flashy, it was lovely, and he loves cars, he loves good living, and how he got into debt and went bankrupt. And so it's a grass to grace story. It's really good. But he also, next to it, gives you practical steps that can help you overcome these challenges, which he calls the baby steps. Definitely worth checking out for those baby steps. And his baby steps are not ordered in terms of the most mathematically effective way to become wealthy. He says he merges his baby steps with the psychological. So for instance, the first step is list all your debts and then start paying them off from smallest to biggest. Now, mathematically, it would make more sense to pay off your debts from those debts that have the highest rate of interest to the lowest rate of interest. So if you have a small debt and it has a high rate of interest, you definitely want to pay that off first. But if you have a small debt and it has a small rate of interest, or it's interest free, then mathematically, you'd probably want to pay that one off. Dave Ramsey says the opposite of that. List your debts by size from smallest to biggest, and you pay the first one off. And because it's the psychological thing of trying to build momentum. By the time you pay off the first debt, you're encouraged, okay, I can take on the next one. You're encouraged, you hit that target. So it's about hitting goals and being encouraged once you hit goals to keep going. So the baby steps are very useful. They're a useful psychological tool. They've helped a lot of people. I definitely think it's worth reading The Total Money Makeover. All right, third book that you should read this year I have is Your Money or Your Life. And this is by Vicki Robbins. And why I love this book is that the central message of this book is for you to begin to think about what really matters to you in your life and make sure that in shaping your financial plan and goals, you are addressing that. There's an exercise she does in the book that's really rigorous. She tells you to calculate the total amount of money you've earned in your entire life. And she tells you to go back, get bank statements, get previous offer letters. It's such an interesting exercise because it's shocking how even when you think you're not earning much, you've earned a lot of money thus far in your life. And then she has you do a calculation where you monetize this money in hours. How much time are you giving up to earn this money? How much time so far have you given up to earn it? And she begins to try and get you to have a paradigm shift about what really, really matters to you. Are you just on this, wheel, grinding away on this treadmill because everyone else is? Because it's what was expected of you? Because your parents wanted you to? But is it what you want? Is it what you and your husband want? Is it what the lifestyle you've envisioned for yourself? And so she spends a lot of time getting you to step away and really, really think about, do you want money or your life? Because if you're chasing money, you'll get it, but you'll probably lose your life in the process. But there's a balance you can strike where you can live the life you want. And it may not be a life that anyone else appreciates, but it's your life. Very lovely book. It was first written over, I think, like 20, 30 years ago when she was one of the first proponents of early retirement, financial independence, and retiring early, even before it was called that. And she did an updated version of it recently. Excellent book. I strongly recommend it. Point 4, The Millionaire Next Door. Now, this is a book I read in 1996, I think, when it came out. And what I love about this book is it spends all this time with stories. I love stories. I love me a good story time. So it has a lot of stories, a lot of case studies, and it gives you the picture of what a real millionaire looks like. A lot of us still assume that to be rich means to be flashy, to wear a lot of diamonds, to be dripping in gold, to drive the biggest, baddest car on the block. And The Millionaire Next Door dispenses with all that nonsense. It shows you that you can become a dollar millionaire being a garbage collector. It shows you can become a dollar millionaire. Basically, there's no secret business that can make you a dollar millionaire. Almost all businesses can achieve it, but it's about the lifestyle and the financial values that you hold. It also talks about the average age of a millionaire, where millionaires live, the kind of cars millionaires drive, how they haggle for cars. I mean, it really gives a real good study and living picture of who is a millionaire, where do they live, what do they look like, what kind of schools do they send their children to. It's a great book for understanding. If your goal has been, I want to be rich, I want to be wealthy, it gives you a picture of, in reality, what wealthy and what rich really looks like. It's definitely a good book. I know they've updated it. The authors were Thomas Stanley and another guy, I can't remember his name, but I know the book was rewritten. One of the authors had passed away and they rewrote it with the daughter. So there's a current version of it that's out. It's also very good, although a lot of the references are historical. They're still referring to the 90s and 2000s. So that takes me to the next book I'm going to recommend to you, which in some ways is also kind of an update, I would say, of The Millionaire Next Door, even though it's not called that. And that's The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And so this came out a couple of years ago. And really what he's doing there is he's talking about, he spends a lot of time, it's broken into these chapters that can be read independently, which is fantastic. And the major takeaway I would say is that he's talking about the psychology, like the psychological makeup, for me, of a millionaire or a really wealthy person, the psychological makeup required to earn and retain and keep and grow money. And so it's really interesting to see the same kind of profiles of people who are rich, people who've built wealth over time, what kind of things they do. But there's some stories and some cautionary tales, right, about people who became legitimately wealthy, legitimately rich, but went too far. They got to that level of greed and they started playing in illegal spaces or dangerous spaces. And even some people ended up going to jail. So there are really a lot of good case studies in the psychology of money. I would say, in my view, it's right in the same vein of The Millionaire Next Door. If you want to understand how wealthy people think, what drives them, what the fundamental principles are for them becoming wealthy and staying wealthy, you want to read The Psychology of Money. The other thing I like about it is that if you've ever had family members, like I remember there's this aunt we have who is really wealthy, but she was so stingy. And I say this in the sense that there were things that her children would go through and she would not support them. Even when they were teens, the kinds of things that her kids had to do to just survive were even disruptive. I mean, she has 5 kids and 2 of them didn't finish university. They dropped out because they just didn't have enough money to finish and started working. And so when people say, well, it's good, maybe she's trying to make them independent, but I think there's a level of independence that you, as a parent, you're responsible to support your children until at least they're adults, which is 18. I mean, if your child is 13, 14, and is having to basically work, I think there's a level of it that doesn't make sense. But reading the book helped me to kind of understand about her in terms of some things, some tragedies, some experiences she had when she was very young had affected her. And so because of that, she has almost like, I would say, like a hoarding mindset when it comes to money. She's holding on to it and nobody's clear why. She's far beyond the stage where she can ever be poor again. She's extremely frugal. But even now, she's in her 80s. She's still a financial hoarder. And Psychology of Money helps you understand why different people have different approaches to how they relate to money. So the 6th book I'm going to talk about is The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. And this book, I think, came out in the 1920s. And it's almost written like it was written like a scriptural scroll. So they use a lot of thou, they, but it also tells a lot of stories, which is nice. And it's just a very cute book. It's very short. You can read it probably in a couple of hours. So it's something you can just buy, pick up, chuck it in your bag or chuck it in your car. If you ever have to go to the doctor and wait, just pick up the book and start reading it. You'll be done before you're done with all your checks. It's a really good book for that. But I like the book a lot. I've even had my kids read it chapter by chapter because it's that, the content is that approachable. The language is that simple. But it talks about the principles of money. what it takes for money to grow, what it takes for money to get lost, what it takes to keep money safe. I mean, it's really talking about the principles of money. If you want to understand the rules of money, you really want to read The Richest Man in Babylon and give it to people who you'd like to also learn these rules of money. I definitely recommend this book for parents. Have your children read it young. They can read it by the time they're 8. You can read it like a bedtime story. It reads like a bedtime story, like a Bible bedtime story, even though it actually is not. There are no scriptures quoted in it, so it's it's a secular book, but it's written in the language as if it was scroll discovered 2,000 years ago. So it's a really lovely book. I highly recommend it as bedtime reading if you're trying to get your children to understand certain principles. You want to plant the seed. Richest Man in Babylon is excellent for that. The final book I have is The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. This book, highly recommended, of course, by Warren Buffett. He says Benjamin Graham was his mentor. A lot of people in terms of being in the financial independence space recommend this book just because it takes the time to really explain value investing. Now, it has a lot of formulas and things that you can use. You can use those if you want, but the overall arcing message of this book is to pick businesses based on their inherent value and stick with them forever. That is it. So, but it's useful in terms of thinking about the mindset, why certain things work or don't, why you shouldn't be tempted to, trade or kind of gamble when it comes to stocks and shares and investments and things like that. So it delves into that. But the fundamental message of the book is buy for value, hold forever, and reap the benefits. So those are my 7 books that I'd like you to read this year. I hope you do enjoy them. And as I always say, stay humble and learn. Bye for now.